So sometimes it can be really difficult to rebuild trust, especially when it comes to communication. It can be difficult to understand where the communication breakdown is happening. How can you rebuild trust when communication is never going in the right direction? And when arguments keep building and building, it can feel kind of hopeless to not even know where to start to break this cycle in order to start rebuilding the relationship up. So in this video, I'm going to break down the 3 hidden communication patterns that destroy trust. And then I'm going to give you the one crucial strategy that most so-called experts don't talk about that will stop these communication patterns happening long term. So, a lot of people know this fight, flight, and fawn idea. This is a kind of psychology 101 in many respects. This idea that when something difficult happens, when you're triggered or a difficult event happens, that we can go into one of 3 modes. We can stand and fight, get angry. We can flight, remove ourselves from the situation, run away. Or we can fawn, which is melt, become passive, and just stop ourselves in our tracks. So these 3 specific actions can seem quite obvious when it comes to conflict, right? But when it comes to communication, is that we can actually fall into these modes very, very subtly. And with that, start to destroy the emotional safety within the relationship by not even realizing that we're doing these things. So it can be easy to see these 3 modes when they explicitly happen, right? When you argue, when you walk away and storm out of a conversation, or when you are sarcastically just saying yes, yes, yes. But you can fall into these habits internally as well. When you fall into one of these 3 modes in communication, it ends up contributing to the communication problems and the overall breakdown of trust within the relationship. And the worst thing about this is that this can happen so subtly that you may not even realize that it's happening. So I want to break each of these down one by one and really see how they happen and what we can do to start preventing them and doing something differently. So the first pattern is fight. This is, always trying to win. So this can be things like saying, I never said that. Stop twisting my words. You're telling me that everything's my fault, or you always do this. This is when you get defensive. This is when maybe your partner accuses you of something or expresses their feelings, and you just immediately jump in and start to fight. You start to combat. You start to rebuke what your partner is saying, defending the relationship, defending your actions. This fight mode is where listening and understanding become a second priority. The top priority becomes defending yourself. Because if you feel like you're being attacked, then you go into fight mode, right? You want to defend your position. This can also be always explaining. So in response to saying something to your partner, you can get into this explaining mode, talking your way through a situation, talking about your thought process, talking about why they're wrong, talking about why they should think a different way. This in itself is super invalidating to your partner. And this is part of this fight mode pattern. Ultimately, fight mode is all about over prioritizing your point. You get into always wanting to win mode. And you think that the more your partner speaks, the more you end up losing. So you prioritize your point, your ideas, your thoughts, your feelings, and you put them above your partner's in the conversation. And what this does is that this ignores the root issue. So when your partner is coming to you with an idea or opinion, a viewpoint that you may not agree with, when you're prioritizing your own point, you're ignoring the emotions behind your partner's thoughts. You're ignoring the emotions behind what your partner is saying. You're speaking at a very logical level. So for example, if your partner is saying, hey, I want to vote for somebody that you don't want to vote for, you can start to get defensive. You can start to explain why they're wrong. You can start to prioritize why your reasoning is so much more logical than your partner's. And what you end up doing is you end up skipping over the feelings, the emotions underneath what your partner is telling you. So if they're saying they're voting for somebody else, no amount of logic is going to sit there and change their mind. But taking the time to talk at an emotional level, understanding their feelings behind their reasoning, why they're voting for this person, as an example, terrible example, but why they're voting for this person, the feelings that led up to those reasonings, this is when you can actually start to understand. The more that you understand, the less you are trying to fight your corner, right? And usually the source of all of these fighting actions within communication comes from a place of blame. You're blaming your partner for this perceived problem. So you're coming from a place of, well, she's thinking this because she doesn't listen. She's doing this because she's ignorant. She's creating a problem within the relationship by voting for somebody completely different. All of these things come from a place of blame. When you're putting all of the weight of the relationship, the problems, the challenges, the discords within the relationship onto your partner, this means that you're approaching it from an us versus them kind of attitude, you versus your partner. This means that it comes from a place of 2 opposing sides. You've created 2 sides that didn't exist before. And the more that you stay in this state of blame, the less likely you are to get through any of the challenges within your relationship. The more you stay in this fight mode, this you versus your partner, the less likely you are to actually overcome the challenges. The next pattern is flight. So if fight was always wanting to win, flight is not wanting to lose. So this is where you avoid arguments, you avoid speaking up, you avoid having difficult conversations. You're flying away from conversations. And this can come out in ways of suddenly you don't know what to say. You're avoiding eye contact, avoiding any interactions with your partner. You're going quiet, or you promise to talk about something later, but you don't actually follow through. This is where points of connection or disconnection with your partner never get raised. So you're actively avoiding the relationship. If you think about it this way, in the simplest sense, a relationship is two things and their relation to each other. So by ignoring that bond in the middle, you're actively avoiding the relationship. This is the thing that makes or breaks you. So when you go into flight mode, you're actively avoiding having crucial conversations with your partner. And whenever there's a difficult topic, let's say the voting example again, you avoid it, or you dismiss it as not important, or you downplay these difficult topics. And you decide that having a conversation is just going to make things worse. The problem is that not having these conversations may work in the short term, but it doesn't last in the long term. And as we said, this could also be actively walking out of a conversation. So in the middle of a conversation, you decide that you don't want to talk about this anymore, and you decide to completely walk out of the conversation. You don't want to talk about it. You're not going to talk about it. You don't want to hear what your partner has to say, and you end up in flight mode, right? This is where you walk out, you avoid. Ultimately, this is where you bury your head in the sand. You don't want to talk about difficult conversations, so therefore you won't. You ignore the relationship. You refuse to have these conversations, period. And this is the kind of mindset of, I can't lose if I don't play. If I don't play the game, if I don't engage, then I can't lose, right? Because especially if you're seeing it in a way of you versus your partner, your partner can't win if you can't lose. And oftentimes the source of this flight pattern is from a place of hope. You hope things will work out, right? You're kind of crossing your fingers that if it's meant to be, it's meant to be. If it's not meant to be, then the relationship's just going to fizzle out, right? So you don't engage in difficult conversation topics because you become reliant on things just working themselves out, which doesn't happen. Things don't just figure themselves out. By avoiding the potential disconnection between the two people, the actual relationship, it means that that relationship doesn't exist. And this is often what happens when people fall for this idea of soulmates. They think that, well, things will just work out. Things will just come around because we're soulmates. So you can avoid difficult conversations on this idea that some magical force is going to rescue you from this situation. And a lot of people can enter a relationship in this way, or even a marriage. Getting married is where you just kind of cross your fingers and figure that things will work themselves out because we're married, right? They have to. So therefore, it just has to happen. Problem comes is that the more that you avoid difficult topics, the less the difficult situations actually become points of connection. You don't build connection because you don't even step up to the connection point. And this means that the more likely it is for the relationship to start to deteriorate. And then there's pattern 3, which is Fawn. This is where you're getting into the habit of simply just agreeing. Yes, I agree with whatever you say. I will do that, no problem. This is where you get into a cycle with yourself of always agreeing with what your partner says, even when you disagree. And usually, when you fawn, this means that outwardly you're saying yes, but inwardly you're saying no. And this is the disconnect between what you're expressing externally and internally, what is actually happening. And this breaks down trust very, very quickly. We can feel like this is going to be a quick win, but ultimately it destroys trust because no matter how well you think you hide it, if you're always disagreeing with something internally, but agreeing with it externally, your partner is going to see that. They're going to see that on your face, in your actions, in the way that you carry yourself in the conversation, in the way that you're performing an action that you've agreed to do that you don't want to do. So this fawn action feels like a quick win because it's kind of avoiding any sort of conflict. But again, in the long term, it breaks down trust massively. It's where you don't want to rock the boat. I don't want to cause an argument. I don't want to have a blow up. I don't want to have this situation any worse than it is. So I'll just say yes. And this means that you end up never giving your opinion. You never give any alternate point of view. You never talk about your worries about things, your concerns, your fears. You never point out any potential problems. And this can be a really quick way of losing your partner's respect because even though it may feel like a quick win, it breaks down trust very, very quickly because it's very difficult to respect someone who is not speaking up. And we can mistakenly think that this is taking one for the team. It feels like it can be a point of pride, right? We're doing this for the bigger picture. I'm just saying yes because this will help the relationship. I'll agree with something that I disagree with or that I have worries on because it's the right thing to do. And the reason for all of this usually comes from this idea that we mistakenly think that we need to be a martyr in a relationship. being somebody that has to make sacrifices, that has to take punishment because maybe we don't deserve a good relationship, or we don't deserve to speak up, or we haven't earned the right to have any sort of opinion. So we think that by punishing ourselves, we are building this relationship, right? We're making sacrifices for the bigger picture. And this is where we kind of lower ourselves to a point where we're deciding that we should just be constantly taking one for the team. So this means that we don't speak up, we don't give our opinion, we just nod and smile. But what happens is that internally, ultimately, it builds resentment, whether it's towards your partner or towards the world. If you think that you're this martyr, over time, you start to feel the pain of never speaking up, of always agreeing, always doing things that you don't want to do, and it doesn't feel good, right? We don't feel like we're free to do what we want to do. So again, it becomes a temporary solution where we feel like we need to be a martyr. So doing this loses a lot of respect from your partner because it means that you're not willing to put in the right work in order to express your opinion in an effective way. You're choosing to take a quick win. So now that we know these communication patterns, that is just the first step. So yes, we can start to shift our communication skills, but communication skills aren't enough. And this is what a lot of people don't talk about, is that learning communication skills is only part of communication. It's also the beliefs and mindsets that you approach communication with. So yes, we can fix a lot of these things with learning and understanding and listening skills, but these skills are never enough by themselves. And the reason is that your view of communicating is going to be massively impacted by your beliefs. You know, the way that you do everything in life is impacted massively by your beliefs. So you can learn great communication skills, but if your aim of a conversation is still in this win-lose mindset, then it doesn't matter how good your communication skills are, your aim of the conversation will still be to win. At the simplest level, our beliefs impact our thoughts, which impact our emotions, which impact our actions. So your beliefs alone are going to have a massive impact all the way along, all the way downstream, right, to the way that you communicate with your partner. You know, if you believe that your partner is not to be respected, if you believe that your opinion is always to be the priority in communication, this means that your thoughts are going to be constantly thinking about how to get your opinion across when your partner is talking to you. So in that moment, if you're not getting your opinion across, then that is going to lead to angry emotions, right? You're going to be upset that you're not able to do what you believe is your right in a conversation. So therefore, you're going to feel like you're being slighted, and then it's going to lead to this breakdown in your communication tools. You know, you're going to start speaking over, you're going to stop listening, you're going to start getting defensive. It's going to impact everything. So all of this stuff starts with our beliefs. So it's important to start unlearning some of these common beliefs that have a massive impact on our communication. So what are some common myths that we can believe in communication that impact our communication skills? And just before I jump into these toxic myths, I dive a lot deeper into all of this with all of my members. And so many of them have found that their communication has been massively shifted and trust has been repaired in the relationship through unlearning these toxic mindset. The more that you unlearn this stuff, the more it's going to come out in your communication and the more trust and attraction that you're going to build with your partner. And all of my members start on the Relationship Bootcamp. And if you do want to join us, then join up on the bootcamp where you'll learn the same fundamentals that all of my members use to start turning their relationships around. I'll leave the link in the description below. So one of the most common communication myths that we can get into is this need to be right. So in conversations where we can get this idea in our head that other people need to understand how right we are, how our opinion is the stronger opinion, this can be a very, very toxic myth, especially when it comes to relationships and building trust. If you constantly feel that you need to prioritize being right in a conversation, it doesn't matter what you do, it doesn't matter how much you sit there and listen, how well you listen, how not angry you get, your aim of the conversation will always be to get your opinion across at all points, right? So having this constant idea in your head that you need to be right in a conversation is going to destroy your intent of communicating in the first place. Another toxic myth is that opinions equals action. So sometimes we can feel very threatened by somebody else's opinion. So for example, let's say your partner is attracted to somebody in work, right? She's like, yeah, he's handsome, he's attractive, I like the way he speaks, I like the fact that he drives a nice car, whatever it is, whatever that opinion is. We can expand that opinion into believing that they're going to take action on it, right? You know, we all have thoughts, we all have ideas. Oftentimes, if you feel threatened by somebody's opinion, viewpoint, idea, feeling, so many times it can come from the assumption that there is going to be some direct sort of action from it. So when your partner is giving an opinion that you may not like to hear, oftentimes your fear and worry can come from this idea that they're going to take action on it. My wife finds the guy in work handsome, therefore she's going to sleep with him. My wife has said that she's thought about divorce before, therefore she's going to divorce me. what happens is that you can get into this thought loop, and it stops you from being effective at communication and being able to build the emotional safety that is crucial to building attraction and trust within a relationship. And this is what we talk about when it comes to emotional safety, this idea of this environment where your partner is free to express their thoughts and feelings without negative consequences, without being invalidated, without being spoken over, without being shut down. The more emotional safety breaks down, the less attraction is built, the less trust is built. And oftentimes this can lead to the thing that you fear the most, right? If attraction and trust is disappearing in the relationship, that it puts your partner in a difficult situation, right? Next is the belief that feelings are permanent. So sometimes when you hear a tough truth from your partner, they're feeling hopeless in the relationship, they're angry at you for something that you've done, they feel that you're drifting apart. We can forget that feelings as human beings are temporary. All feelings are temporary. So even if your partner has been feeling this way for a while, there has been periods where she hasn't been feeling this. So when we hear our partner's feelings in the moment, we can try to change them. We can get into this habit of trying to change our partner's feelings to fix their point of view of the world. If your partner is like, oh, I feel hopeless about the marriage, then we can jump into this, oh, well, here's what you need to do. Here's what we should do. Here's what I'm going to do. Because we're trying to change, we're trying to control our partner's feelings. And what happens is that when you're trying to control somebody else's feelings, you're trying to resist what they're saying. And oftentimes this can actually make feelings even bigger. You know, if you think about it this way, if I tell you to not think about a pink elephant, what is the first thing you think of? A pink elephant, right? If you try and tell your partner or imply to your partner that they should not be feeling the things that they're feeling, it's going to make those feelings feel even bigger. It's going to amplify those feelings because they have these feelings still, but now they don't even have a space to express them. So a lot of people don't understand how massive an influence we have on the way our partner feels in trying to push them to resist their feelings. It's actually going to make them bigger and scarier for them. Then there's this idea of out of mouth, out of mind. So this idea that if you don't hear tough truths, then your partner isn't going to think them. So if your partner has an opinion about you that you don't like to hear, this idea that if she's not saying it, then she's not thinking it. So in conversations, if you're trying to shut down or you're trying to walk away from what your partner is saying, that's something you feel hurt by, they're still going to be thinking it. But what you've told them now is that you're not willing to hear it. And again, this can lead us to a place of blissful ignorance, right? Where we think nothing bad is happening because she's not saying it, so therefore she must have stopped feeling it. But again, this comes from a place of if they can't even express it, if they can't even feel their feelings to you, the person that they're supposed to spend the rest of their lives with, then they're going to be kept inside and they're going to build up and they're going to still be feeling them, right? They're still going to have these thoughts. They're still going to have these feelings. But now these temporary feelings don't have anywhere to go. So these temporary feelings start to become a bit more ingrained because they start to stick within us, right? So this myth of if they're not saying it, then they're not feeling it, is going to cause a lot of problems within your communication. Because ultimately, this is where people can be blindsided by a breakup. I've actually done a deeper dive on this, which I'll link to on the screen. But oftentimes, we can get into this idea that the relationship is doing fine. But what can happen is that problems can build up within a relationship. There can be a lot of arguments, and then suddenly, things are okay. Things seem fine. And we can become blindsided by a breakup. Because what's happened is that the problems have still been there, but your partner has decided to stop talking about them. And this is why communication is so crucial in relationships, and building a safe environment for your partner to be able to express themselves is crucial to stop this blindsiding from happening. And I talk about it in this video, this pattern of less and less difficult conversations happening, leading to being blindsided by a breakup. The more you can understand this pattern, the more you can get ahead of it and start to not only reduce the damage, but start turning the relationship around for the long term. So I'm going to leave you with that deep dive video, and I'll see you over there.